he would say that's trivial. So that's important to keep in mind. So it, postmodernism is all individualistic. It's all about me, but it's not relational. Because, oh, I'm in a lot. I mean, when you think of, we trying so hard on Zoom to be in relationship, and we're doing the best we can to try and be in relationship. We'll have a Q&A after this. Now, last week we tried to be in relationship in a live meeting, got 2 people. So sometimes the culture says, Father, we don't want to be in relationship with you. Just stay on Zoom. Well, that's humbling, but it's very healthy to know that. So we want to be relational, and it's an effort. Why is it an effort? Because you can be in conflict with groupthink. You're trying to be emancipated, freed from groupthink, so that you can be open to God think, if you will, or God energy. There's a lot of what we might call postmodern dualism, and competition comes out of that. There's just so much of the pie, and we're into power, control. Or as Thomas Keating, he used to live here, a Trappist monk, programs for happiness that just do not work. So rampant individualism is something that lacks a sense, a consciousness of one's vocation to service. See, some people think, well, you're living in a monastery, you're running away, you got no contact, you got no relationship with anybody, and you're just all into your own self. It's selfish and self-centered, you monks. Well, I don't think so, but it could be. But you could be in the midst of society, or whatever you want to call it, and still be a very selfish, self-centered person, making believe that you care, when in fact it's all about getting what you want and only being of service to get what you want. Well, I happen to be a guy whose boss, most people saw, died on a cross. So, because he wouldn't be what people wanted. He wanted to be of service. He didn't want to be in control. Keep that in mind, you Christians, when you say Jesus is God. He didn't want to be in control. He wanted to be of service. He wasn't here to fix the world or to fix you. He was here to open you, we might call it enlightenment, open you to the possibilities or to what's really real. So what you want, as Ram Dass would say, be here and be now, so that you can then be of service to others. And one of the ways you really are service to others is when you really can be here now. Be in the present moment. I mean, think about how do you listen to another person? When they're talking to you, are you judging them based upon their past? Then you're living in their past and your past. Or are you trying to think of an answer to fix them so their life will be better later? That's living in the future. A lot of people, when they talk to me, they're not looking for an answer. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. They want connectivity. They want compassion and sometimes forgiveness, but they're not looking to live in their past or their future. They want to be present. And so you learn to listen. How? Because you learn to be present to yourself a couple of times a day in some meditative practice. You get into the be here now. And that's going to make you a very good person in terms of service. You will become for others. So don't worry. So, I got so much things to do to help people. I got no time to meditate. And I says, oh, your ego's going to take over and you're helping. And you're not going to be very helpful. And they'll know that it's really all about you. Well, you seem to be helping. I think what you find out in meditation is a sense of oneness first of all, with yourself. Uh, I mean, think about you get those moments of meditation when you're not thinking about anything except you're conscious of meditating, but otherwise you're not thinking about anything. And sometimes this divine energy will take you to a depth you're not even aware that you're meditating. Well, that's uh, that's like a nirvana, being blown out. No consciousness of self for the moment. But believe me, when you come back into the room, so to speak, uh, awaken to the chronos time, the time on your watch, you will have a sense, little by little, a sense of oneness with others. Not that you're all the same. Keep away from that kind of oneness, but you're connected at a deep place. But you've got to first get connected to your deep place. And then maybe you'll open people up to the possibilities of them making an effort, that their true happiness and true fulfillment will come from a spiritual journey, not an economic journey, or if you will. So society tends, group culture, society tends to enslave the human being. And we think, no, I'm free. And I think, how free are you? Advertising doesn't want you free. Advertising wants you to buy and buy again. Because society is really a kind of almost a top-down thing. Somebody expects to make something commercial out of you not being free to say yes or no. And think about clothes. I know growing up, I'd look at pictures of myself when I was younger, and if I don't have those pictures, my sisters will send me them to remind me of my silliness. And I'll look at myself and I said, "What a stupid haircut!" But I'll remember almost the day and the age, and that's the way people were looking. There was the rebellious Terry Ryan. Well, how do you show rebellion? That is, I'm not going to be like you. I thought I was on a spiritual journey. No, I was delusional. So I had to look like whatever I thought was someone who was not going to be part of groupthink. OMG. And then the clothes you wear and so on and so forth. You just got to stop and think about it. How much you try to fit in, even though you're saying, this is me. And so one of the things I like about the Trappist monastery is they're not into trappings. I don't think that's why they're called Trappists, but they're not into trappings. Our chapel is very simple. We do not have stained glass windows. We got one stained glass window, and that's when you face east. That's the Regina window, Mary and Jesus and so on. That's all we got. But all the other windows are just like windows, just look right through them. We don't have statues. We don't have pictures. We don't have tapestries. We're not about things. We're about delving within and not having abstractions like that. And another person says, it's not an abstraction. I says, well, no, for you, it appeals to your imagination. Well, we're trying to get deeper than our imaginations, okay? So we don't want to be enslaved. And there's a tremendous pressure to conform. And I don't think you're going to get out of that by being enraged. You know what happens with enraged people? They don't really connect. And some of them then try to form whole new systems in which they enslave others to be doing things just the way they want things to be done. So I think of Jesus, for instance, okay, who I believe is God, but just look at him as just Jesus, all right, because there's a historical person and he was suffered on a cross. Now, the state, the systems, want to be rid of him because he will not conform. Okay? He will not conform. So the state wants to be rid of him. So they attempt to shackle him and to pin him to a cross to get rid of him. But because he does not give in, and he had chances to give in and escape and save his butt, but he wouldn't be anything but the Jesus he knew he is. And that was an emergence into freedom, but it came through suffering the power of the state and the power of organized religion at the time, if you will, that leadership. He said no to your groupthink, and he stayed free. And they said, "Oh, wait a second. But didn't he die?" Well, there's going to be a certain amount of dying, a certain amount of letting go and giving up and losing things if you're going to be free. That's your cross. And what did he say when he was free? He said, did he curse them? No. He was free enough to say, Father, forgive them. This man's suffering terribly on the cross, and he has compassion for others. I mean, tell me that's not a transformation. Father, forgive them. That's really perfect love. He's so connected with those people. He sees their faults, the mess of their lives, and he doesn't hate them, even though they're either ignoring him, jeering him, or they actually nailed him to the cross. It's a free statement that he's able to make. In suffering, you can be free. It didn't end the suffering. He disintegrated, he died. But then now we get into the faith. He went from this disintegration to completeness, which we would call in my tradition, resurrection. So what we're looking for, and he says, come follow me. Well, the contemplative life is going to be where you're going to lose some things because you're going to have to let go of some stuff in order to be who you really are. And that can be uncomfortable. I mean, people will say to me, why the heck are you up there in that monastery? Why aren't you here doing, I don't know, whatever they want? And even if it's not that, there's certain things I have given up. And it wasn't, I mean, it's not easy, but it's worse to try to be someone I'm not. So I have to keep that in mind. I have to be who I am. And so do you. So that's the completeness that comes. It's bearing the cross of becoming who you truly are. And I think that I think is why in my tradition, God became human, was to show us what a difficult struggle it is and what you're up against, and yet loves you as you try to let go of groupthink and group power structures and become your true self. There's always got to be something that you're going to have to let go of. So it seems like disintegration at times, but it is completeness. And what you're going from is passivity. Passivity is just giving in, being passive, letting things happen, as we sometimes say. You're going from that to a creativeness. Well, what's that creativeness going to look like? It's going to look like what it is for your unique self. As you discover, you're going to become a more creative person. I have a sister. I have a couple of sisters, and this one lives in Florida, and she paints. I don't remember her painting, and I've seen some of her stuff. She's good, and she writes poetry, and she's had a long life of doing many different things, and here she is. She's not saying I'm retired. I just kick back. She's still doing some. She's pursuing being herself and discovering things about herself and then expressing them. in ways that you share. You never give up. A lot of people listening to this say, "I'm retired." What does that mean? You're retired. There's no retired like we're all the same. That means you don't do something you used to do. Maybe I don't do something you used to do that you got paid for. But it doesn't mean it's over. Now you continue to do something that's part of continuing discovering all about you. It never ends. So this is the creativeness that comes from meditation. And it really is a passing over into spirituality. Your spirituality is becoming you, and it never ends. Any number of times I've read about some holy person, they were called holy, in whatever tradition, and you read about what they did most of their life. And then at some point, very successful in many things, they just said, okay, I'm done with that. I'm now going to go and be a hermit or join a monastery and live a quiet contemplative life. And I used to think, oh, no, you got all these talents and gifts. You got to keep going and doing stuff. Well, they did that. And now they feel a call. That's a vocation, a call to this more contemplative, deeper life that I'm sure they practice some in their life of giving and serving. And you never stop serving, even in a monastery. You are of service to the world by their example. And then if you live in a monastery with other monks or nuns, you're of service to one another because you live 24/7 with each other. So you've got to learn to love and accept and forgive. So personality, this unique self, assumes that they're always going to be going out from self to others. And original sin really is a concentration on self-centeredness, egocentricity. It's all self-containment, holding in, not being of service to others. There are some people who say, no, I help others. But if without a contemplative life, what they do is they try to control others. That's what they call help. I'm trying to help you to become the person I think you should be. I don't want that kind of help. I've had enough of that kind of help. I remember I was very much part of groupthink going through the seminary. I did not have a vocation to be a seminarian. I think I have a vocation to be a priest, I think, but I don't have a vocation to be a seminarian. It was a very difficult time for me. It was a lot of groupthink. And two things: I didn't have enough of a contemplative life to be better with groupthink, to be kind of not so much participating, but yet not being a troublemaker. I was more a troublemaker. But I had a sense I didn't fit into this kind of lockstep way of life. And the Paul's Fathers were anything but lockstep. So I really was not quite ready for any group think. And I remember after I got ordained, I would do something that you might call on my own time. In other words, I was trying to be a priest and fit into what does a priest do? Well, he says mass, he hears confessions, he baptizes, does weddings and funerals. People come and talk to him for counseling, and at least try publicly to look like a decent human being. But not that I didn't do that stuff, okay? But there was just something in me that says, this is not my main thing. And I had to really work it. I didn't have enough of a spiritual depth to do it nicely. I did it a little bit rebelliously. I began to teach about contemplative prayer. And hardly any other Paulists was interested in this thing. I think I knew one other guy, maybe two or three, and there were a couple of hundred of us at the time. And but I said, this is me. Now I began to teach it, and practice it, but I was attracted to it. That was the thing. I was attracted to it. So you have to keep this in mind. Even if you do something imperfectly, if you're attracted to it, you might say that might be an indication that you've touched a piece of who you truly are. And if you haven't, it'll pass. You won't be able to sustain it long enough because it's not your true self. And I've been doing that almost my entire priesthood. And it morphed into something. It was what you did on your own time. In other words, after you did all these other things, you could never turn down any of these other things. But if you had some free time, then you read and prepared talks and gave talks and so on and so forth. And eventually I came to see this really is my calling as a priest. And so I've been concentrating on it now for almost 20 years. But that's what happens. Sometimes you're going to try something and you're going to find out, okay, this really isn't me, but you found out by trying. And usually, if it's something that no one else seems to understand or make sense of or even talk much about, it might be just a quirk, but it might really be you. You know, when groupthink says this, you don't fit in, you might be on the right path. You'll know if it's God's path, you'll know you won't hurt yourself. You won't do great damage. And if it's not God's path, then it's not your path and you'll drop it because it's just another ego trip. So you don't want this, you don't want the original sin of self-centeredness. In other words, self-centeredness is pretty built into us because there's a lot of people going around with it and they don't even know it. So Berdyaev would say that the egocentric person loves abstractions. In other words, a person who's kind of self-centered can still say, love your neighbor, but they won't love the person near them. They'll love the group neighbor. They'll love the abstract neighbor, but not the real person. Francis I, our present Pope in my tradition, counsels about this. He says, don't love the poor, love a poor person that you see and run into and meet. That's how you express your love, because that's when you are forced to get out of yourself. If you just, it's much easier to love the poor by giving money to a charity and let them figure it out. Or I got no time to love the poor. Well, you know, my church is a church of the poor. Something happened over a period of time, but it really was the church of the poor. So you got to love concrete people. And so that becomes something that I certainly learned in the monastery, because I do not live alone here. I live with concrete people. And some days I think they're driving me crazy. But it might be that I'm not being my true self. That is, I'm not getting my way, but I blame you. So it's a constant, living with others is a constant journey and a constant pointing to, are you practicing some spiritual depth in your prayer? So freedom for Berdyaev, and I think he's right on this, and I've heard others say it. Freedom is not so that you can do what you want to do. That's not freedom, because if you're not on a spiritual path, doing what you want to do is egocentric, and it's going to hurt other people. Freedom is the declaration of your obligation. I am free to do what I am made to do. I'm obliged to be me, and that's not going to be easy sometimes. So it's not a right. It's an obligation. And we need to keep that in mind. When we talk about being free, I hear so many people talk about that. What they want to do is what I want to do when I want to do it. And I don't believe in any kind of spiritual path. The heck with that. That's all nonsense. That's all religions and churches and synagogues and temples and blah, blah, blah. It just allows them to blame the institution for their not getting into the daily effort of meditation. I mean, they may not even know about meditation. Well, that's why not. I'm trying to help there. So this freedom of obligation, you're free to relate. You're free to serve. You're free to develop solutions based on compassion, love, forgiveness, acceptance. So what you're looking for is to be loving in connection with others, not in control of others. So you drop this hierarchy of better and worse. You think of Berdyaev. Now, certainly in Russia, there was the Russian aristocracy, and then there were the peasants working on the land that they didn't even own. And then he goes to Europe and he sees the class system, European class system, and he sees all this hierarchy, the better and the worse, and the way we treat one another and who we hang out with and how we look down our nose at. And each is a unique creation from stardust, but yet unique. And in my tradition, uniquely created by love itself, loving love. So let me look for a moment at something in my tradition called the Eucharist, Holy Communion, which we have in our Mass. And scholasticism, developed by Thomas Aquinas back in the 1200s and became really the focal philosophical, theological way of talking about dogma. It kind of put God in a place. God sits in a place in the host. And we got away from God doesn't sit in a place. God dwells, energy, a verb, in you and in others and around you. God is just permeates. It's not so much in a place. And when you put God in a place, you ask this question. Here's a question that I have heard over and over. Catholics, when does the bread become Jesus? You know why they ask that question? Because they live in what is called chronos time. That is minute by minute by minute by minute. God doesn't live in that kind of time. God lives in what's called kairos time. I'm going to unpack that for you now in terms of the contemplative life. It's a question that is not answered in chronos time. It's God doesn't go from here to there chronologically. This doesn't change from this to this chronologically, which is why you never get a really good answer. God is ever becoming and ever becoming in you. You becoming your fullest self, developing into a Eucharistic presence, food for others, if you will. And the host becomes, in a whole different way of thinking, becomes God, but not in second by second, minute by minute. It's what we call kairos time. Now, where's kairos time? You sit in meditation. And as it deepens, you move from where you're thinking about a lot of things to where you're just aware of meditating. You're just aware of being in the presence. And then you're taken to a spot. We call it a spot. You don't know where it is, in which time passes. All of a sudden, your little clock goes off and says your 20 minutes is up. Where'd the time go? You were in kairos time. That's what it is. It has no sense of seconds and minutes and hours. That's God's time. And that's why, for me, being a Catholic with the Eucharist is so important, because I get to enjoy kairos time happening as I'm in chronos time. You know, I'm there in church. Time's passing. People say, "How long's Mass going to be?" That was a long Mass. That's chronos time. So there's no. I don't think I don't even try to answer when does it become. It says, oh, you're living in your time, not God's time. God's time is much different. So God is always within you, always indwelling. And you don't want, he really doesn't like evolutionary philosophy. He doesn't care much for that. He says, we have a lot of this now. The universe, God made the universe is evolving, God is evolving, and so on and so forth. You read Ilia Delio and Richard Rohr, and so on and so forth. He's not much for that. He says it just evolves into an impersonal cosmic process. That's what he finds, impersonal cosmic process. Well, it's something to keep in mind because he says we're really not part of a whole. In other words, I'm part of this star that exploded some billions of years ago, millions of years ago. He says we are a whole in this creative formation. In other words, in a sense, we are the universe. And you say, what's that all about? Why don't you just allow yourself to find a spiritual practice and it'll start coming to you? That you are the whole. There's the person who goes outside and looks at the stars at 3:00 in the morning and says, oh, look at this beautiful universe. And I'm part of it, the little speck of me. Yes, that's good. But that's not too difficult. Then you become the person who goes out into the universe. And I am the universe. You are so one with the world at that moment. And that's kairos time as well. So we try to just keep all these things in mind. We talk about, he does talk about body and soul, and that was part of the dogmatic tradition of my church. And I think we're looking at it a little bit differently now, because what you want to do is get away from separations and things. Here's my body, here's my soul, and that sort of stuff. Whenever you start talking in dualistic terms, I think you're getting a little bit away from that the wisdom of the divine. It just got a sort of a false dualism, if you will. He says it comes from Descartes, whatever. But the soul and body, it's vital unity. It's a wholeness. When you get into deep meditation, you're not even aware of your body. Think about saying, I'm going to sit and meditate. And you start thinking about, oh, this chair is uncomfortable. Oh, it's too cold in this room. Or, oh, it's too dark, too light. Ooh, something smells, whatever. That's your whole physicality being involved in the process. You're not meditating yet, okay? You're sitting uncomfortably, if you will. So your body's uncomfortable, and you want to get your soul energized, and so on and so forth. Well, think what happens if you can just find a position where you're not thinking about your body. It's part of, that's why it's important to find a position. Don't say, well, my guru said I have to sit in the lotus position. Well, the heck with your guru. That's just group think. You got to find a position that's comfortable for you. Want to lie down on your bed? Anything that will get you to not think about you and your physicality, if you will, so that you can just let go. And when you find yourself letting go, you're not really thinking much. You're not focused on your body or how you feel. You just get deeper than that. And that's when you get a sense of the oneness of you and the wonder of you in the oneness of you. So think of it. You get in touch with that spirit center, if you will, trying to find a word, spirit, and it energizes the body. It spiritualizes your physical self. And often you'll feel better. You'll feel better. Your physicality will feel better. Think of that as resurrection for you that day. And not be, because when we are so focused on ourselves and our comfort, we tend to get egocentric, and we really don't want that. Now, we've been going at this since about 55 minutes. So what we're going to do is, I see 3 chat things. I just want to make sure that I'm not supposed to do anything. Think again. How often do you think? How often do you think again? The Joy of Being Perpetually Wrong. Oh, that's Christopher. That's the book. Oh, okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a break of how long, Chris?
We'll be back at
10?
10:05. 10:05. 10 minutes.
10:05. That gives you 10 minutes to get a cup of coffee or take care of your physical situation. We'll be back in 10 minutes for a little Q&A. For those of you, oh, look at that, 16. Wow. I'm a guru. Well, here we are back, and welcome back to those who came back. Um, and before we open it to questions and comments, whether I have answers or not, I think you might have seen on the screen the two ways to support my work so I can pay the bills that I have is Venmo, and it shows you what the Venmo is. If you run Venmo, is very easy, or just send a check to me here at the monastery. And I think the address was up there as well. It might still be on the chat. So as we try to continue here, let's open it and see what kinds of questions people might have. Now, how are you going to do that? Well, you can just unmute yourself and ask the question. Here's a question from Mark Evans. Can I come up to the monastery for your next live event? That may be in kairos time because we don't have a live event planned because we don't have the connectivity to do it outdoors, and we haven't set up a time to do it indoors. We could do it indoors at the retreat house, but we can only get the big room in the retreat house when there's no retreatants, and we have retreatants, so we don't know when that can be. But anybody can come to a live event. There's no restrictions as far as we know as of this moment. So we don't know when we're going to have a live. We hope to have a live one somewhere down the road for all my friends in the Roaring Fork Valley.
Father Terry.
Okay.
Father Terry will be scheduling live events for this fall and in the spring. We'll go back to the part of the Silent Saturdays, the Saturdays of Silence. We'll be doing those again where we sit in the retreat center and we'll do some kind of talk with that. So I will send out a schedule. We'll probably pin down dates here in the month of August, and I'll send that out.
Okay, so we do have some things planned. Even I don't know when they're going to be, but they're going to be. So good. We're going to have some indoor times because we'd like to do something live, unless, COVID says something about it. So the external world does impinge upon our freedom to do some things. And that's the reality. That's part of what a coronavirus is about. But we don't want to create the viruses of culture, not bacterial, but the virus of the way people think and do, and try to get everybody else to think and do just as they think and do, to make them feel better.
So will those live events be publicized on Mary Baumgartner's email list?
Yes, because Mary Baumgartner is now on our list. So when Chris Lake notifies all the people, including these people in Knoxville, the SOS people, he notifies them, he'll notify Mary, and then they will notify people like yourself. So yes, we're sending it up so Mary gets a notification, and then she will send it out to all of you.
All right, well, I'll see you this fall then.
Well, one can only hope. One can only hope, but because be hard to do it in the dead of winter. It's kind of snowy up here, thank God. But we will try to do things in the fall. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be in San Francisco, Sacramento, and other California places from about mid-ish October to almost mid-ish November. So we are going to have a talk from the West Coast on Zoom. But we may be able to do one of these SOS things live from here for SOS. How do I access the recording? Someone asks. Mary Kendall says, well, you access the recording by going on snowmass.com, snowmassbookstore.com. No caps, no spaces. It's snowmassbookstore.com. When you get on there, it's going to list for you the YouTube channel. You don't have to, it doesn't say go to YouTube and look for it. It just says, boom, hit this button and you're there. So you don't have to know YouTube. You just click the site and it shows up. As will the previous talks, except last week when we didn't really record it at all. But, that's how it works. We try to make it pretty easy for you all to get the recording. So I have my own playlist called Terry's Talks. Not bad. I didn't know that, but so keep that in mind as well, because that's the way to do it. Well, I'm going to finish up with a couple of comments that will continue what I've been talking about, and then we'll move on from there in 2 weeks. We're going to continue to talk about this whole idea of becoming, discovering, and developing this unique, unchanging you that's inside that really is, in my tradition, is the image of the divine. A person is what school tries to do. I mean, certainly Catholic school tried to do this. Everybody obey. You dress the same. You look the same. You better act like the same, or else. So we're trying to socialize these little street urchins. I was a kid from the Bronx. Socialize, civilize us, Irish kids, so that we'll fit well into society, get a job, be a responsible citizen. That's not bad things. We study things like social studies, and in New York, that included learning about your state government. You have state representatives and state senators, and when do they meet? Where do they meet? And so on and so forth. You learn the geography of your state. It was things just so you could fit in and be a knowledgeable member of this society. But you have to be careful that you don't become a slave and not even know it. That is, you're not becoming, by slave, I mean, you're not becoming your truest self. A society at its best, I would say that, think of my tradition, my church, think of your church or your group, and maybe you're in AA, that maybe that's your society, or some other 12-step group. It's all about becoming not like everybody else, but becoming like you're supposed to, like who you really are. And you know what happens when who you really are, you'll be very helpful to everybody else in that 12-step program, because you will be trying to control them. So you've got to have a spiritual life. And now some people say, I got a spiritual, I go to church. Well, yeah, but I don't think that's enough. In my tradition, we were told we had to go to church or else God's going to get you. Ooh. So that what they do is to make you participate in group think. They say you're going to be punished if you don't. Now that is not a good way to teach a love of God, which is probably why a lot of people dropped out and are still dropping out of my tradition. That's not the way to happen. That going to church should come from a deeper place within you. I just talked about the Eucharist, but it's got to come from a much deeper contemplative practice. And if you don't have that spiritual life, you're just going to get sucked into the group think. If you don't get sucked in and you do have a spiritual life, you'll have a conflict because you refuse to be enslaved to the world. And that's going to be conflicting. And my tradition speaks to that. It's called the cross. So what meditation is doing, it's letting go of your enslavement to time. I don't have enough time, or I'm giving up time to meditate. That's all slave mentality. It's all feeling controlled by. Let it go. Let go of this kind of being enslaved to the clock. Yes, you set a time. This is what I like about the centering prayer as an app. I guess you just go on in your apps and find Centering Prayer. It's got an app that keeps time for your meditation. What I like about it, that I don't like about alarm clocks, is you set it for how many minutes you want it to be. And when those minutes are up, you just get a light bong, bong, nothing else. You hear the bong. But it's not like an alarm clock, it goes ring, ring, ring. It won't stop until you get up and turn it off. You don't have to do anything. So I have the timer on Center Prayer. It's across the room someplace, but I can hear it. When it's over, I can keep meditating if I want. I'm not enslaved to the alarm clock like you are when you wake up in the morning. You have to get out of bed to do something. So meditation is to take you into the timeless, the kairos, the depth, where you don't even notice time. So at least for a few moments a day, you're not enslaved to it. Nobody feels guilty when they're in the depth of meditation. But there's going to be a conflict because people will say, why you meditate? You have to do this, you have to do that. So there's always going to be some sort of a conflict. You just have to realize that. So this freedom from is also gives rise to some suffering. Because it'll cost you a little to be caring about another person for that person. That just is what it is. I'll finish up with this. After, I'll tell you the difference between being on a spiritual path and not in group living. After we finish in a couple of minutes, I'm going to go and prepare a lunch. Now, when I'm not connected deeply, this is what happens. Why don't those monks feed themselves? Or I'm making lunch for these guys, these lazy guys. Can't they make their own lunch? And they're not even going to be thankful. They're going to complain that it isn't something, so on and so forth. So I'll be making lunch, but I'll be all resentful. I'm all on my resentment list. That's no good. That's what a lot of us do when we're of service without a contemplative path. On the other hand, it's each of these persons is, in my tradition, is Christ. They're guests in my life. They're the presence of the divine. And I get to serve them. And I get to be of use. And believe me, when you're preparing food that way, you are so at peace. And when you're all angry about it and judgmental, they're not worth it. They're lazy. That's judgmentalness. That's pigeonholing people. And that's separating them from, I'm the good guy, they're the bad guy. See, it happens in monastic living. It happens in everyday life. It's the way it is. You've got to have a contemplative life. Otherwise, it just goes sideways. So just keep trying to become you, and it'll work. Well, thank you all for participating. And I know that you can hear it again on we'll have it by tonight. It'll be up, I'm sure. And hopefully other people will be there. So 2 Saturdays from now, 9:00 my time, which is Mountain Time, we'll be back and doing more. So thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.